everyone knows that Sweden hasn't got the best political reputation amongst the right. And I've got an article here from the 17th of November 2017 from the BBC. A failed Swedish flag hoax shows the decline of the extremist 4chan message board. Obviously, lots of things wrong with that headline. Also, the notion that 4chan has declined since 2017 is just wrong. But they tried to fool people into believing there was a push to change the Swedish flag to the Islamic crescent.
4chan has managed to fool people of more ridiculous things.
That is true. And this petition's kind of hilarious.
Minister of Sweden,
please consider changing offensive national flag. Sweden has improved. Time to improve our flag with a diverse group of people holding the new Swedish flag, the same colours but with a crescent moon.
A familiar image on it.
But, in right-wing spheres and online, Sweden is often used as a bit of a political punching bag because of what they have inflicted on what was a nice country. Swedish people, lovely people. They can create a nice civilization. And that has gone downhill. And what has changed? Well, migration mainly. So Sweden has actually done a lot of good things recently. So they're floating lots of ideas. I don't know whether they're going to necessarily follow through with some of this, but we're just going to go through some of this quickly. It's not necessarily the focus. So Sweden may start paying foreign-born Swedish passport holders $1,000, obviously they're not paying them in dollars, but the equivalent of, for leaving Sweden, which I think is a good idea. I think more countries should do this. Just, hey, I know you've got our passport, but you're not from here. We'll give you some money to get lost. It's like in the Trailer Park Boys where he says, I'll give you $5 to F off. Basically that. And I think that will work. I mean, it's kind of annoying that taxpayers have to pay for it.
Well, there's two things with this. One is that the headline includes a word that I've not seen many other people include. A lot of people were saying that this was already a done deal, but it says may.
Mm-hmm.
So they've not started doing it, they are considering doing it.
Yes.
The other thing that's a worry with something like this is that it will only get a few very short-term opportunists taking this measure, and then what is there to prevent these people from coming back? Because yes, you can offer them $1,000 in the short term, and a few of them might take it. You'll get maybe a very small percentage of the bottom rung people who just really want their money right now. I think a lot of people are going to stay in Sweden anyway, just because of the fact that Sweden as a country offers much higher living standards from anywhere else they may go. And also, them leaving Sweden, here's a third thing, does not necessarily mean that they're going back to their home country. It may just mean that they go across the border to Norway.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
What's to prevent them from just migrating across each European country? And if each European country offers a similar scheme at some point,
they can hop around. Yeah,
they can hop around collecting money, and if there's nothing to stop them coming back, well, then you're just funding them even more.
If this is to be done, there's got to be lots of caveats. Like, you've got to renounce your passport. You can't move to any other neighbouring European country. So it needs to be a pan-European thing, basically, which I don't see happening for it to work properly. But I like the sentiment. I think that were this the norm in Europe, perhaps, where it's like you're leaving Europe, pack your bags, you're going back to, I don't know, Africa, the Middle East, somewhere like that. There's also this one as well, which I'm amazed isn't a law already. This is obviously the Guardian whinging about it, but the general idea is doctors, social workers and librarians, don't know why I can't say that word, are among those in Sweden who have sounded the alarm over a proposal being explored by a government-appointed committee that would force public sector workers to report undocumented people to authorities. Why this is not the law already, just... You should inform the authorities if you think there are illegals trying to use public services. That should be the law already.
Yeah, if you are a public service worker who knows and can be proven to know that there are undocumented people claiming benefits, claiming all sorts of things, and you don't, you should not only be fired, you should be charged and fined.
Works for me. I mean, if you're working for the public, in the public interest, there are certain standards you have to uphold. And if you're, not serving the taxpayer and you're serving foreigners who are in your country legally, probably likely criminals because they moved to your country in a criminal way, then you're not helping anyone. You're helping your own political ideology normally, I would imagine. So there's also this one as well, whereby this is September of 2023. It's worth mentioning because although the moderates are in charge, they're a minority government and they're sort of in coalition with the right, and so the moderates have been dragged a little bit rightwards to placate that aspect of the coalition. As I understand it, I don't really follow Swedish politics too closely, so if you are Swedish, please do correct me in the comments if that's not the case. But here, and I'm directly quoting here, work permits will only be made available to those labour immigrants in Sweden who earn a salary of at least 80% of the Swedish median salary, which is a start.
It's a start. Mm-hmm. Still too low. It should, if you're going to be having these people, it should be about, I would say, 120%. Mm-hmm.
Well, where they're clearly an asset, right?
Well, yes, you would want them to be clearly an asset and clearly capable of actually being a net tax gain. Mm-hmm. The country, because this is what The Economist found when they did was it Denmark that they were looking at?
We'll be looking at some Danish data soon.
Yes, and they were saying that with particular populations of migrants, particularly the MENAPTs, Middle Eastern, North African, Pakistani and Turkish, in no part of their lifespan are they an average net contributor to tax. They are always a drain.
A perfect example of that in Britain are Somalis, where they're disproportionately represented in crime,
social
welfare
housing,
claimants, social housing, all of the things that you don't want people in your country to be doing. They're disproportionately overrepresented. So I would say it would be pretty safe to say, actually, no Somalis, please. They're not contributing. Donald Trump did the Muslim ban for terrorism. Why can't we do other things like that? Also, that we've got this as well. Why is it not scrolling down? Wait, there we go. Well, I've got the power of mouse. So, Sweden to make tougher rules for family reunification. Is that the one? Make it hard. Yes, that's right. So, the government this is a direct quote again, is exploring options of introducing further DNA testing to confirm the identity of people, because people are lying about their place of origin, and they're testing their DNA because actually we have pretty good ethnic DNA mapping. We can tell where someone is from pretty reliably based on their DNA. This would particularly apply to cases where the family relationship cannot be established by paperwork alone, particularly when it comes to children. So basically the sort of family chain of one person gets their foot in the door and then about 20 people are living under the same roof, all a family apparently. Just lots and lots of cousins. We get that a lot in Britain as well.
Living above barber shops.
That's right, yeah. And here we have another one, which is also not scrolling down for some reason. This is part of the political pact with the right, as they're saying. Here we go. This is an interesting part. This is something that's been doing the rounds online. Quite a few people talking about this, and we'll go over who has been saying this. People leaving Sweden will exceed immigrants in 2024. So this is touted as a success of, well, Sweden's done all these things to deter migrants, and now actually they're leaving more than they're coming here. This is great. And it's perhaps not what it seems.
Well, I noticed that this is a DW article, who are not, as far as I'm aware, on our side. Mm-hmm. And so that this might be some kind of fear-mongering article on their part, because of course they're going to be on the side of, no, we need to get as many in as possible.
You presaged my next point here. We've got The Guardian here, from open hearts to closed borders, behind Sweden's negative net immigration figures. And it talks about asylum seekers and hate, and they had a warm heart to the downtrodden, and now they're evil and mean and far right. You get the idea. We've heard it 1,000
With no
times.
reference to countries like Sweden now becoming the rape capital of Europe.
Yes, we will be talking about that as well. So
I'm just guessing all of the points here.
Stop being so knowledgeable, Harry. So here we have a graph of basically a measure of how prejudiced people are, I suppose, if this is how you would measure it. I think it's a relatively reasonable measure. Who would you not want to have as a neighbour? And it says immigrants/foreign workers. Sweden is right at the bottom with 3%. And then you've got Iran at the top there with 42%, and Russia 32%, Japan, China, Greece, Morocco, and all the way down at 3% Sweden. But a lot of the countries are at like 40, 30%, perhaps even higher than reported there, some of them. And then people of a different race, Sweden is at 1% would not want them as a neighbour. So I think it's safe to say that Sweden is about as unracist or unprejudiced, however you want to frame it,
Do you know
as
when
humanly
this,
possible, right?
Do you know when this survey was taken?
There's a date at the bottom?
There isn't a date at the bottom.
Okay.
It just gives the source. Because I wonder if this is a relatively old survey.
It
and
may
things
well be,
might have changed since then.
The time doesn't...
Although, of course, that you can still vote for anti-immigration policies without expressing those kinds of views.
I'm not making that point. The point I'm making is that this basically has allowed Sweden to be taken advantage of. They at one point had attitudes like this. It doesn't matter what time it is, really. It is previous to all of this stuff being passed, I think. But I feel like my understanding of the situation, at least, should I say, is that Sweden was very, very welcoming. They're very open in a sort of naive European sense of, well, we're friendly with, other European countries. Why not open the door to more people? But then they realise, oh, wait, actually, European people are perhaps a lot less likely to commit crime than other people. And we can see that from this sort of thing. So they've got the second highest crime rate, gun crime rate in Europe after Albania, which of course exports criminals. That is their main export.
And this is from gang violence.
Mainly, yes, I think
it must
so.
be all those Viking clans.
So look at that. Albania...
bloody hell on Albania.
sandwiches Bosnia and Herzegovina between Sweden. I said that the wrong way around, but you get the idea. Sweden seems like an anomaly in the top three there because it's sort of, Balkan countries, Adriatic countries that you might expect it from. Muslim countries.
And then also Northern Ireland, which has some history.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of firearms around that part of the world, aren't there? And so it's also worth mentioning, this isn't in the Guardian article, 55 people were shot dead in 2023 in Sweden. And between Norway, Finland and Denmark combined, there were 6. And Sweden only has an official population, and I say official, of 10.5 million. So it's quite a small population relative to, say, United States is or the UK.
And relative to how big the country is as well. Although I'm
true.
sure they're all condensed in a few population centres.
I think it's weighted heavily down the southern side, isn't it? And so you can get figures like this, number of homicides in Sweden, and you can see a general trend towards it increasing. If you were to draw a line from 2013 to 2023 over that 10-year span, there's an obvious trend here, isn't there? And of course, what is the main shift in Swedish culture? Well, there are less Swedes, is what's happening, and now there is more crime. So there's obviously a problem here, and of course there is the much sought after Swedish crime data that breaks it down by rough ethnicity here, so here we have the African countries, obviously disproportionately represented as they are in all European countries, and also you've got that's South America here, Central America, and then you see US and Canada. These are all overrepresented relative to the native population, and I think that's the countries within the EU. And then look at
what is the difference between the darker and the lighter line?
So it explains it here. So darker colour shows the native-borns with 2 foreign-born parents, and i.e. second generations, while the lighter colour shows foreign-borns. So whether they're second generation or first generation.
So most of them, the second generation, are actually more likely to be violent.
Yes, they're not integrating, they're doing the opposite, in fact. They're becoming more violent, not less. Except for Central Asian, for some reason. Just one anomaly. But also you've got more data here, which this is only foreign-borns, and this is talking about various adjustments. I think it's for age, sex, and disposable income and education, and you can still see that Africa, Central Asian, I think it's West Asian, and then South American, lots of them are overrepresented relative to European countries. And an easier body of data that has been translated into English is the Danish data, which reflects similar things. I think that in the Swedish data, obviously, there's a greater overrepresentation of Africans, but there was still a massive overrepresentation for Middle Eastern countries, and that's reflected in neighbouring Denmark as well. I'm quite surprised that Kuwait tops it there, and this data is not adjusted for age or sex, but Kuwait, Tunisia, Lebanon, Somalia, Jordan, Uganda, Morocco, Iraq, Algeria. Those are some of the top countries. You've also got Ethiopia in there, but then you start looking at these darker blue countries. These are the Western countries, all down here. So orange is Africa, red is the MENAPT thing. But
Japan is right at the bottom with barely registering any figures whatsoever.
Yeah, United Kingdom, France, Finland, all sort of grouped together. All these European countries, Croatia for some reason off next to Brazil, but Russia, and they've even got data for the Soviet Union there. So they've even got old data included here. So this is, hang on a minute, 2010 to 2021. And they've got the Soviet Union. What's going on here? Maybe it's just their country of origin. So they came from the former Soviet Union. But you get the idea, right?
I was going to say, because it's got Yugoslavia up at the top as well.
It does, yeah. So I'm guessing it's people who'd moved there that still claim that ethnicity. But you get the point that in Scandinavian countries, this trend is mirrored, and across all of Europe, really, because this mirrors the same sort of trends that we get in the UK as well. And Sweden's crime rate is now the highest in Northern Europe, just overall. And so this was, I think, yes, 2023.
Or 2023.
There's a camera in the way, so I had to shift around.
You can ask me. I've got a nice clear view.
We're very professional here. And let's actually talk about the reality, because, of course, we've obviously outlined the problem. We've outlined some of the things that they're doing, and this notion that they're now re-migrating foreign-born people.
Do they have an actually net negative migration?
No. So here's an article that talks about it. It is in Swedish, but I have translated it into English, and I'm going to read a little bit from it. The fact that Sweden had a net emigration between January and May does not necessarily mean that there were more emigrants than immigrants in those months. Statistics Sweden's press officer Johan Claris told the outlet.
Samnytt.
Yes. The reason is that since last summer, the Swedish tax agency has been cleaning up its population register in order to deregister people who are incorrectly registered in the country, something the Minister of Migration also addressed during his press conference. So this totals 18,695 people, and if I scroll up here, where has it gone? We can have a look. There's a nice little graph here. Looking at each quarter's, I think each month, it seems like those figures could account for this, because the number of people being struck off the register is from June of last year to the current day.
And they're being included in emigration figures, I'm assuming.
So it might be relatively close, and it does seem to have disincentivized asylum seekers because they're making it harder, and potential immigration as well. But the problem's still not solved. People certainly aren't leaving at rates that are being claimed. That much we can say for certain. But it seems to me that there's a rather significant number of people being struck off, and that is what is accounting for this in the first place. And it's difficult to know exactly, because you need a better breakdown of the data, and I can't access that in English. But lots and lots of people actually talked about this as, yes, this is a great victory. This is proof that these policies work, and I'm going to name and shame them. But, many of these people I like, so it's no bad feelings. But
it's understandable if you didn't end up going to a very specific Swedish website that had those kinds of figures and that information, when most of the English language coverage of it has been, on the leftist side, fear-mongering, saying, typically, because of course the leftist perspective is not, we need to help these people, it's we need to just stuff them all in as quickly as possible so we can utterly destroy the culture of this country, because that's the underlying reason for it. So they're just fear-mongering so they can try and get more immigrants in as quickly as possible.
Exactly. So here we have National Conservative talking about this, saying now there's net immigration, and it's not true. So because we at Lotus do our research, we can report on fake news even better than the BBC, because I think they talked about it as well. Paul Joseph Watson did Steve Laws did. Zuma Historian did. Peter Sweden did. He's even got Sweden in his name. And also some outlets that I quite like did as well. The Publica did. The European Conservative did. Although they did issue a retraction. So they said, well, hang on a minute. Not so fast. Actually, it's a clean-up of the population register. So,
I do think to try to steelman some of these positions, obviously some of the information that they were reporting on turns out not to have been quite as positive as they first thought. The very fact that Sweden is making these moves, putting these ideas out into the public, is in and of itself a positive move.
I was about to say that exact thing. You've read my mind for like the millionth time now today. So we're just on the same wavelength. But overall, I think actually, Sweden's doing a relatively good job of moving in a good direction and sort of leading Europe in a way to sorting out these problems, because there's no doubt that Sweden is suffering the most from mass immigration out of a lot of European countries. Looking at the crime rate, and Swedes are very civilized people. This wouldn't be the native Swedes necessarily, although I don't doubt that the presence of foreign criminals encourages Swedes to join in at a higher rate, sort of the broken window effect, if you will. So hopefully there is some more tangible sort of movements towards remigration. I would like to see that, and I think that some of the policies being floated, although none of them I feel like sort of that will definitely work, that's great, that's going to really help the country, they're all signalling a good direction. And of course it could be a similar situation where you've got the Conservative Party in the UK where they signalled about, well, we're sending people to Rwanda to process them and getting rid of them. Well, it's all just a PR ploy. Maybe things will amount to that, but I don't know. But I think certainly keeping an eye on what's going on in Sweden is going to be very important, because I think once one European country does something, it makes it acceptable for other European countries to do it. We saw it in COVID.
If they follow through.
Yes. And we saw it in COVID. We saw it in lots of other different policy decisions. And so I think that that's how a lot of European politics functions. It's sort of, there's a prime mover, and then all of a sudden it's a bit more acceptable to do these things. And hopefully Sweden sort of spearheads this, because they have the most to gain from solving these problems.
Hi folks, thanks for watching. If you'd like to support us, help us keep the lights on, make sure that we have a job tomorrow, go to lotus.com and £5 a month, sign up and go and watch Bo's history series Epochs. In this particular episode, he is discussing with the amazing Godfrey Bloom the history of money, which is something that, frankly, nobody knows enough about. And while you're checking us out, go over to X, formerly known as Twitter, and follow us at lotuseaters_com.